guys, Trent at Black Horse Ranch here. It's almost spring and all the snow's melted off. So I thought I'd do kind of a follow-up video. This is our first winter that we've had since we put in our high tensile fence, and just kind of show you some of the stuff, a couple things that we learned and what's happened, and just how the fence has weathered the winter. So I'll have you take a look here. This is one of the first H-frames that we put in right here, and I mentioned in the previous video how I had kind of wrapped a wire different, and so it's actually twisted the post, but I'll show you that on this H-frame right here. So here's where you can kind of tell it's kind of unraveled already, but this wire used to come straight across the front, and then I just had one bend in the back, and you can see it's already kind of straightened out. The wire has anyway. And if we look down the edge of this H-frame, you can see that post is leaning in, and so basically that wire has twisted that post and pulled it in because of how I put it in there, or how I wrapped the wire on that post. So on all the other H-frames that we've done, I learned basically to come, straight off the post here instead of trying to come off the front of the post or the back of the post. And so what that's also done is, these gates had short chains on them already, but I can't even take that chain out. I mean, that's like a guitar string. And you can see the bracket here is bent. This side's pulling that bracket out, and the chain's bending this one in, so we'll have to cut that chain off. And then I've got some extra chain. I wonder how much that post will move after we cut that off. So that was an installation problem. So if you're installing a high tensile fence, just don't do that. Just make sure you come off the middle of the post with your wire. Okay. The other one is, so here's another post. So this is the H-frame just on the other side of the gate, and you can see that post is leaning. And on this one, what I should have done, so the gate was actually supposed to be right here, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I kind of messed up and I moved the gate down there. I think I might have driven some extra posts or something. But if this post would have been the end, so this is actually a corner. The fence comes and it wraps around that and actually changes direction at this post. So if it would have just terminated on that post, and we would have had an H-frame there and then the gate, that would have been the better way to do that. So on corners, you're supposed to have, if the corner's greater than 15 degrees change in angle, you're supposed to have two large posts 4 feet apart. And I'll show you that on some of our other corners. A couple of them I tried getting away with just one, and you'll see what happens there. So let's go on to the next one. So here's the next spot, and this was a corner I thought I could get away with putting in one post, and I don't know if you can see that very well, but that post is leaning in. And the funny thing was, the reason I thought I could get away with it is because this ground was so hard. Like, we had trouble, there's a lot of gravel in it, and we had trouble getting the post to go in, driving it in. So I thought that would be a fine corner to have just one post. So there's a reason they put out those recommendations, and so this should have been two posts to keep that from leaning in. And you can see how much that post has moved looking down the hole there. So this post, we may have to pull this post out and put in two posts, or if this is too soft of an area, I might have to build a double H-frame with a corner post and an H-frame on each side of the post. So let's move to the next one. So here's a corner with a double post, and the first post is moved in a little bit. So this one was done the way it was supposed to be. Again, you can see on the back side, you can see that gap there where the post is tipped in. So the next, we'll keep an eye on this one. It's not horrible, and we'll see how it fares. And maybe after next winter, we might have to come in and put in a double H frame here. But it just really depends on the ground. Like this ground was soft, so it's kind of expected, but I didn't expect it at that last one. All right, let's move on to the next. So here's a corner post, and it's a single, and it's sitting in water. I'm standing in a few inches of water here, and it is fine. So it really just depends on the ground, and it's hard to say. Obviously I didn't guess right on some of these other ones. But yeah, so yeah, it kind of just depends. Maybe a year in, you kind of see what's going on and adjust. But all these posts are in water, and they're doing pretty good. So here's a situation where we had a double H frame on a corner, and it's doing its job for the most part, but you can see we've got the gate is kind of tilting down, and we tried to put those in level when we first installed them, and I think that post is leaning toward the gate a little bit, which is kind of backwards. But what I think caused that is the fact that we've had a couple posts on this string of fence bend in, which has loosened the tension on the fence wire, which has caused the weight of the gate maybe to pull over. The other thing is this area right here, this is where there's a culvert that comes under the highway, and we need to try to fix this at some point. But this water just comes raging. I mean, this whole, you can see the little stream there, but it was all the way across, all the way through this whole gate and H-frame area was a big raging torrent of water. So some of that might just be like leaves and stuff that's filled in, but the gate definitely has a lean to it, and we can adjust it with the hinges. And then right on the other side, here's a double corner, and again, that one looks great, no issues there. So, and then if we move on right here, so this is a perfect example of why we like the high tensile. So we've got a tree with a whole bunch of branches sitting on the fence. You can see this wire here is squeezed all the way down. These ones are pushed down. And no broken fence line though. So we can get that tree cut off of there. It looks like a whole tree came down. But we can get that cut off of there, get some firewood, and then just tighten the fence back up. This is where all that water runs out of our field, and there's a post right in the low spot. And this corner still looks pretty good. If we get a view this way, the posts are still pretty good and upright. And I'll get a view from the other direction. Posts are still good and upright. So you can see down here our bottom wire's been silted in, and then there's a bunch of weeds and stuff hanging on it. But one thing that can happen here on these kinds of posts where you have the tension of the fence pulling up on the post, it can actually pull the post out of the ground. And there's a couple of places that we went by where we have that possibility, but I haven't seen any indication that there's posts coming up out of the ground yet. So this one still looks pretty good. So hopefully our ground is good enough to hold them in. Here's another area where there was water that flowed out of the field. And I don't think it eroded a whole lot, but maybe a little bit. But that fence is pretty high. It's about a foot or more off the ground right in the middle there. So we might come back in with a post and drop that in right there, and just bring the wire closer to the ground. But posts on either side are doing good. There's another solid corner. That one held up good, no bending. And this end of the field had the most snow. So I think at the most we probably had about 20 inches, and we had quite a few freeze-thaw cycles. So that's actually what kills your fence, is when the snow starts to thaw, it compresses and it pulls the fence down, and then it freezes again, and so you have basically this ice on top with the snow melting underneath, and it pulls a lot of tension downward on your fence, and that breaks barbed wire. So far we've had no broken lines, and we're all the way down at the far end of the field, so that's good. Here's a corner H-frame right by our gate at the bottom end, and we're right on the edge of the river here, and this hasn't moved at all, so this one's held fast. This side looks good as well. So here's a single corner that should have been a double, but I think this is going to end up being an H-frame. You can see how much it has moved. This was standing in water, and this ground is a lot of gravel and pebbles and sand. Super hard to put posts in, but it looks to me, I mean, you know how like when you run water through sand it almost becomes quicksand? I think that's basically what happened here. As soon as there was, you know, water moving around on it, the ground just becomes flowable, and I think this just bent over. So this is an area we'll probably have to do 2 more posts and an H-frame on either side of this corner, and we'll have to reinstall that corner post. This is what you're supposed to do on a double corner. You can kind of see how the posts are leaning against the tension of the fence, and so that basically, the idea is that once the fence starts moving the posts, all it does is straighten them out. But these ones haven't moved, so they're still putting tension against the fence, which is good. Here's another good one. H-frame hasn't moved. This one's a real easy one. It's in a straight section of fence. This was just for the gate, and you can see the chain is still loose, so we haven't lost any H-frame tension, or neither one of them have moved. Here's a corner that was also completely submerged. There was a torrent of water that was flowing from the creek across the field into the river just behind there. And we got the first post here is perfect. It's still leaning against the wire. And the second post is moved, but it's moved almost straight up and down. So hopefully that'll stop there, but just something that we'll have to pay attention to, you know, over next year in the spring. It probably won't move in the summer, but when we get more water and snow the next year, it'll probably move again. Here's another leaning corner post, and if I remember, this one we put in crooked to begin with, leaning the wrong way. But you can look down at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there is a gap down there. So it has moved some. Here's another single post corner, and that one is also leaning, and you can see how far that one sticks up above the fence. We weren't able to get that one any further in the ground. We augured it, and again, this is really gravelly around here, so when we were augering the hole, it just kept caving in, and that's as far as we could pound it in with the post pounder. So and that was later in the summer, so we might have to come back in the spring sometime and get that one in. But again, we can see at the base the big gap around the bottom, so it's moved. So every spring, you know, you got to come back and retension your fence. Plus we've had all the posts, you know, moving around a bit, but you can see that that's way too floppy. And let's look at our tension spring here. So there's lines, there's one right in there, and the other one might just be underneath the spring, but you're supposed to tension so the spring is right in between the 2 lines. And so that one needs to be tightened up. It's not out of spec, well, maybe a little bit, but all of these are pretty loose. Yeah, so just something you got to do maintenance wise, but on the high tensile, it seems a lot easier to go around and tension your fence. You know, you've only got a handful of places where you've got these tensioners, rather than going around fixing fence everywhere if it was barbed wire. So this one's a round corner here, and there's actually this post and the next post down there make a whole corner, and these ones are good. They're in a really gravelly area. These ones were augured and driven, and they both seem to be still leaning the right way against the pole of the fence. Here's another single corner, and it's leaning the wrong direction. Don't know if you can tell in the video. So again, a single corner. Again, another single corner. This one's great. So the last one we looked at was just back there. So this is very similar ground. Yeah, don't know what the difference is. Another single corner, and this one's moved, but it looks pretty good. It's almost straight up and down. And this area right here is where the creek, when the creek floods, it goes right in the field right here. So you can see all of the debris on the wire. The bottom wire's way out here, and it's pretty tight. So there's been a lot of force on that. We'll have to clean it out. You can see over here, there's the main fence right here, and the other wire's buried in here. So it's about 8 inches out from the other wire. Again, you know, I don't think barbed wire could handle that. It would probably break. So, but you get a little more debris on here, and there's a lot more tension on that. And we've had worse, I think, just from the evidence. So we've only been on this place for a little over a year, and you know, we've seen it flood a couple of times, but there's log piles and stuff down by the river, so I think it gets a lot worse than this, but we'll have to see how it does in those situations. So this post right here that I said had moved a little bit, it's been sitting in water for maybe about a month now. This creek's been up and down for that long, so that's pretty good to hold its shape that long. But again, single corner. This post was probably our most tensioned as far as wanting to pull up. So you can see the gate goes way up that hill there. And when we first put the fence in, we actually spanned across this little gully, and it was like 2 feet off the ground, so we had to add that post in. But you can see there's the bottom staple 4 inches above the ground still, so there's no real evidence that it's been pulling up, which is good. And so here's our main gate. That looks pretty good still. And on this gate we hung the hinges on the front of the posts because we want to be able to bring the tractor and stuff in here and go and turn immediately down. So these gates need to open 180 degrees. So this post right here is basically just strapped to that big post, and it still looks pretty good. So overall, not bad. A couple areas we got to mess around with probably. That gate's the worst one, where we did that bad install on the H-frame. Otherwise, pretty happy with the high tensile. So just to summarize what we've learned with the high tensile. So we had the one installation method where we came off the front of the post with our wrap, and it's twisted our H-frame. Otherwise, our H-frames have done really well. There's none that have really moved, with the possibility of that one that's been sitting in the flow. That one may have already been that way. I just don't remember. But so ground, you know, the ground that you're putting stuff in, I didn't do a very good job of understanding what ground I was putting stuff into and how it would move during the spring. So I don't know, without doing a geotech report and getting all technical on it, you probably won't know that. So for us, it was kind of a trial and error. But I think the main thing to take away from this is your corners. So I think in a couple of spots, I probably did one post where it was greater than 15 degrees. 15 degrees isn't much. So that's one thing that we would probably do different. Don't skimp on the corners. Make sure you either do a double post or you do a double H-frame on the corners. It's not that big a deal to come back and redo it, to disconnect the wire and reconnect it, even if we have to splice in some extra. and we still got the post pounder and all that kind of stuff. So, but the corners I think are the main takeaway from all this. We'll have to see how the posts that look like they'll be in water a lot, we'll have to keep an eye on those and make sure they didn't break or anything. The one post down there that's twisted on the H-frame, I could actually wiggle that one, so it's been moving quite a bit. And I walked the upper field. This was just the lower field that we did, so it was the first part of the fence that we installed. And then the upper field doesn't have any of these issues yet. There was one spot in the upper field where I thought we maybe went a little too long with our wire, and there was too many ups, downs, and corners. And so part of it's tight and part of it's loose, so it's not being able to pull tension across the entire run of the fence. But we can go in and add tensioners to that at a different point where it's loose, and we might have to splice some extra wire in, but again, you got the crimps, so it's really easy to splice in. So you just want to make sure you do it in the middle between two posts so that when your fence is trying to slide through your staples, you don't have a crimp hitting your staples. So overall, that's kind of the sum up of our first high tensile fence experience. Hope you liked the video. I think our other high tensile fence video has been one of our most popular, so I wanted to do a follow-up and just let you know how it went. So go ahead and subscribe if you like the video. We'd really appreciate that, and take care.